Good evening, gentle dreamer, and welcome back to Storytime Boulevard, your destination to sleep. My name is Andrew, and I am your host. Tonight, we'll revisit a world you may already know, but through a softer lens. Gone are the riddles and the rush. This is a wonderland touched by time and stillness. A place where clocks tick more slowly, tea is always warm, and even the curious learn to rest. Our story is called Alice and the Clockmaker's Dream, and in it, a grown-up Alice is quietly drawn back to the dream realm she once wandered as a child. Only now, it welcomes her with whispers, not wonder. And those she once knew, they've changed too. Time has softened everyone. Before we begin, if you find peace in these stories, we'd be so grateful if you take a moment to like, comment and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps Storytime Boulevard grow and brings more dreamy tales to gentle hearts like yours. Now, let's take a few moments to settle in together. Find a comfortable position. Let your body be cradled. Whether you're nestled beneath the covers or simply resting with eyes closed. Take a slow, deep breath in. Feel the air move through your chest. And now exhale. Let go of any noise from the day. Let it drift far, far away. Breathe in again. And as you breathe out, feel your shoulders loosen. Now, silently repeat to yourself, I am safe. I am home. I am ready to dream. And with that, let our story begin. Alice lived in a cottage at the edge of the countryside now, far from cities, far from noise. Her garden grew wild, all lavender and soft thistles, and the wind carried the scent of mint through her kitchen windows in the evening. She had long since returned from Wonderland, or so she thought. Her days were quiet, filled with bookbinding and clock repair, an unusual hobby for someone who once lost all sense of time. But Alice liked the hum of the cogs, the rhythm of old gears ticking back to life. She said it reminded her that even time could be mended if handled gently. One evening, just before dusk turned to night, Alice noticed something odd. The clock on her workbench had stopped at precisely 11:11. It hadn't broken. She'd just replaced the parts. And yet, it refused to move forward. She turned her head. Something shimmered outside the window. Not quite light, not quite shadow. a rabbit, wearing a waistcoat, holding no pocket watch, but rather a small, glowing lantern. Alice blinked. "Well," she whispered, not surprised so much as curious. "I suppose it's time again." Without another thought, she slipped on her soft boots, left the front door ajar, and followed the trail of silver footprints that were already vanishing in the dusk. The trees bent gently as she passed. The stars blinked open, one by one. And Wonderland, it seemed, had remembered her. The rabbit didn't run this time. His steps were unhurried, deliberate, the soft crunch of his boots on fallen leaves echoing like the ticking of a watch slowed to half speed. Alice followed at a distance, marveling at how quiet the world had become. There was no wind, no rustling of branches overhead. Even her breath felt lighter, as though the very air was stitched with silence. It struck her then. Wonderland wasn't wild anymore. It was restful. The rabbit's lantern glowed with a kind of warm hush, casting shadows that didn't startle but soothed. Every now and then, he would glance over his shoulder, not to see if she was keeping up, but to make sure she wasn't rushing. He seemed to be inviting her to match the pace of a dream, not the demands of time. After some moments, or maybe it was longer, here, time curled rather than marched. The trees opened into a clearing bathed in silver. And there, like an old sentinel in the middle of a field of moon-coloured wildflowers, stood a tall grandfather clock. It had no house, no wall. It simply stood on its own, ticking softly, the hands turning with the grace of falling petals. Alice stepped closer. The carvings on its face had changed. Instead of Roman numerals, each hour was marked by a memory, a faded image only she could see, a ribbon she once wore in her hair, the outline of a rose bush, the flicker of a dormouse's tail, a teacup mid-spin. She placed her fingers on the cool wood. "It's still ticking," she murmured. "Because you are," said the white rabbit from behind her. His voice, once sharp and frayed with worry, now sounded like velvet. He no longer clutched a pocket watch. His waistcoat had been mended with golden thread, and there was a gentleness in his posture, like someone who had finally found sleep after a long, long vigil. "I used to think you were always in a rush," Alice said, turning to him. "I was," he replied, with a knowing smile, "but only because I thought time was something that could leave me behind. I've since learned it's more like a garden. It grows, whether you watch it or not." Alice laughed softly. "And here I thought you'd lecture me again about being late." He stepped beside her, lifting the lantern between them. Its light seemed to hold stillness itself. Not a glow, but a pause, like the space between one breath and the next. "I wouldn't dream of it," he said. "Besides, no one's late here, not anymore." A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, just full. Alice turned back to the clock. "So why now? Why bring me back?" "You never really left," the rabbit said. "Not the part of you that dreams." He walked a slow circle around the base of the clock, then pointed toward a barely visible trail, paved not with stones, but with soft cogs, winding vines, and leaves shaped like watch hands. It stretched into the woods, silver lit and utterly quiet. "There's someone waiting," he said. "He never stopped setting a place for you." Alice raised an eyebrow. "The Hatter?" The rabbit nodded once, ears swaying with the motion. "Still mad, but in the kind of way that makes you feel safe. He brews his tea slower now, speaks less, thinks more." Alice tilted her head. "And the rest?" "You'll find them, one by one. Each of them has changed. Time does that. Even here." She looked down the path, already feeling the pull. Not frantic like before, but soft, like being called home. The rabbit stepped back into the clearing's edge, lowering the lantern to his side. "You won't need this where you're going," he said. "Just follow the scent of bergamot. The steam knows the way." And with a final nod, he faded into the dusk, not disappearing, but blending, as if the light and the silence had agreed to keep him company. Alice stood still for a long while, listening to the slow tick of the grandfather clock, her heart matching its rhythm. Then, without a word, she stepped forward, and Wonderland opened to receive her. The path was unlike any Alice had walked before, not the dizzying, twisting roads of her youth, but a winding ribbon of earth lined with moss that glowed faintly beneath her feet. There were no signs, no riddles, just the scent of bergamot floating through the trees, and the faint clinking of teacups carried by the wind. The deeper she went, the warmer the air became, like the feeling of walking into a sunlit kitchen just after the kettle has boiled. Then there it was, a long wooden table stretched out beneath an ancient willow tree, whose branches swayed not with wind but with memory. The table was not cluttered with madness, nor set for chaos. It was tidy, thoughtful. A single place was set: porcelain cup, soft linen napkin, a saucer balanced perfectly atop a handwritten note. Seated at the far end was the Hatter, but not quite as she remembered him. His hair was still wild, though streaked now with silver. His jacket, once an eruption of mismatched patterns, was now a deep indigo, worn in places, with frayed cuffs that suggested time had softened him too. He didn't look up right away. Instead, he poured 2 cups of tea in complete silence, his movements slow and careful, like someone who had spent many years learning to listen to the quiet. Alice approached the table. "You're early," he said at last, without a hint of sarcasm. She smiled. "I thought no one could be early or late here." "Oh, now you understand," he replied, smiling as he gestured for her to sit. She did. The tea was exactly how she remembered, fragrant, warm, and impossibly comforting. "I never stopped setting your place," the Hatter said after a pause. "Even when the table got longer or shorter, or sometimes just disappeared altogether." "I didn't know I'd be back," Alice replied. "I thought Wonderland was something I left behind." He leaned in, resting his chin on one gloved hand. "We're not a place you leave, Alice. We're the place that waits." A bird sang nearby. Not a loud call, just a single, soft trill, like punctuation to a peaceful sentence. She looked around the table. There were faint impressions on the wood, faded outlines of old teacups, sugar cubes long dissolved, the ghost of a chessboard, all reminders of games they once played. "I remember the riddles," she said, almost to herself. "The nonsense." He nodded. "We needed nonsense then. You needed it, but not now." She looked up at him. "And what do I need now?" The Hatter didn't answer right away. He poured her a second cup and let the steam rise between them. "Stillness," he said at last. "Not answers, not adventures, just stillness." Alice sat back, closing her eyes for a moment. The tea warmed her from the inside out. Around her, the world didn't spin or shrink or shout. It breathed. She opened her eyes again. "Will I see the others?" The Hatter smiled faintly. "Oh, yes, they've been waiting too." He reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. It unfolded itself in mid-air, not a map, but something older, a memory. She could see hints of a garden, a cup balanced on the edge of a book, a faint feline grin disappearing around a corner. "They're in their places," he said, "just as you are in yours." Alice looked down at her hands, older than they had once been, but steady, rested. "How do I find them?" The Hatter tilted his head. "You don't. You remember them, and then they'll come." He raised his cup in a quiet toast to what lingers, even when we think it's gone. Alice clinked her cup against his. The sound echoed softly between the trees, and the wind, as if in agreement, rustled through the branches like a lullaby. The tea had cooled, The table, once so inviting, now shimmered faintly, like it too was ready to vanish. Alice looked up from her empty cup. The hatter had disappeared. No sound, no farewell, just a faint warmth where he had been, and the lingering scent of bergamot in the air. She stood slowly, unsure if she was meant to follow a path or simply wait. But then, from the edge of the clearing, something moved. No, not quite moved. It smiled. A grin hung lazily in the air, wide and quiet, like a moon resting on its back. Then, piece by piece, it was joined by eyes, amber, unblinking, and the silhouette of a tail, curling like smoke. The Cheshire Cat. He didn't speak at first. He simply regarded Alice with the look of someone who had been expecting her all along. "You haven't changed," she said softly. He blinked slowly, then stretched mid-air, as if waking from a very good nap. "Neither have you," he replied at last, voice smooth as velvet. "You've simply remembered who you were before the noise." She watched as he floated down from the branchless air, padding silently across invisible ground. "Do you ever walk like a normal cat?" she asked. "I've never seen the point," he said. "Besides, the ground rarely leads where one truly wishes to go." Alice smiled. "Then where does this lead?" The cat's grin widened. "That depends. Are you here to escape or to return?" She didn't answer right away. The question hung between them like mist. She hadn't thought of this as either. She'd simply followed the ticking, the lantern, the steam. The Cheshire Cat circled her once, tail brushing lightly against her arm, though she couldn't quite feel it, just the idea of it. "You always ask too many questions," he purred. "I always thought no one answered them," she replied. "Perhaps because you were asking with your head. Wonderland only ever answered the heart." He stopped before her now, eyes narrowing in a way that wasn't unkind, just searching. "There's something in the garden," he said. "Someone who doesn't know if she's been forgiven." Alice felt the air cool just slightly. "The Queen," the cat nodded. "Her world is quieter now. No more orders, no more shouting, just a brush, some roses, and a silence she's painted herself into. Is she expecting me? Only in her loneliest moments, which, as it happens, are most moments." Alice felt a heaviness move through her chest, not sorrow exactly, but recognition. Time hadn't stopped here. It had simply softened everything, even the once terrible Queen. "Will you show me the way?" she asked. The cat began to fade again, grin first, eyes last. "I'll show you the way to yourself," he said, The rest is just walking through memories. And then he was gone, like a thought you meant to write down, but let drift away instead. In his place, a single rose petal fluttered down from above, landing in the palm of her hand. It was white, but the edges had been carefully painted red. She closed her fingers around it and began to walk. The path narrowed. Gone were the glowing moss and the whispering trees. Here the air was still, not tense, just untouched, like it had been waiting a long time to be noticed. A low stone arch appeared ahead, crumbling and overgrown with ivy, yet somehow untouched by time. Above it, written in faded gold, were the words, "Her Majesty's silence." Alice stepped beneath the arch, brushing her fingers across the stone. It felt warm, as though it had been sunlit, though there was no sun now. Only that soft, ever-dreaming glow that Wonderland kept for itself. Inside was a garden, but not like the one Alice remembered, not the wild maze of roses and hedges, or the trumpet blaring declarations. This one was smaller, quieter. Rows of white rose bushes lined the path, each one in various stages of blooming, and every single rose had its edges brushed with careful strokes of red. Not dripping, not rushed, just painted thoughtfully, as if someone had taken their time. At the center of it all, seated on a stone bench, with her back straight and her crown set gently beside her, was the Queen of Hearts. But she did not look like a queen. She looked like someone who used to be one. She wore a simple grey dress, the kind that once belonged to mourning. Her gloves were stained with red paint, and in her lap, resting delicately on a folded piece of cloth, was a paintbrush. She did not turn when Alice stepped closer. "I didn't summon you," the Queen said quietly. "I wasn't summoned," Alice replied. "I followed the silence." The Queen exhaled, not quite a sigh, just breath, as if holding herself together had been her only task for years. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "I didn't think you would be. But I don't expect forgiveness either." Alice walked slowly around the bench, stepping gently between rose bushes, until she stood in front of her. The Queen's eyes were tired, not with age, but with effort, like someone who had tried too long to make up for something without knowing how. "I spent so long shouting," she said, trying to be heard. "But when the echoes stopped, I realized I never listened, not even to myself." She held up the paintbrush. "This was the only thing I kept. Not the crown, not the guards, just This, to fix what I ruined. Alice sat beside her. You were never meant to rule like that. I didn't know any other way, the Queen whispered, and by the time I did, no one was left to show. Silence followed, but not the empty kind, the peaceful kind, the kind that grows when there's nothing more to prove. Alice reached down and picked a rose that hadn't yet been painted. Without asking, she dipped the brush into a small pot of red nearby and slowly, gently traced the edge of each petal. The Queen watched, not correcting, not commanding, just watching. When it was done, Alice placed the rose in her lap. Maybe we were all trying too hard, she said. To be loud, to be clever, to be right. The Queen gave a soft nod. Now, I'm just trying to be quiet. You've succeeded, Alice replied. They sat together, two women who had once been players in a chaotic game, now simply gardeners at the end of a long day. And somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed softly, not to signal urgency, but to remind them time still moved, even in dreams. The garden faded like mist as Alice stepped away, her hands still scented with roses and paint. She didn't know how long she walked. Time was soft here, not quite still, but unbothered by structure. Trees gave way to open glades. Glades became gentle hills, and eventually the earth seemed to fold in on itself. And there it was, at the bottom of a hollow, nestled in the center of a patch of wild chamomile and lavender, sat a teacup, a very large one. Its porcelain curves were faded by time, edges chipped and kissed by ivy. The handle arched into the sky like the spine of an old harp, and a tiny staircase spiraled down its inside wall, leading to a softly glowing doorway at the base of the cup. Alice smiled. She had heard rumors of this place in her first wanderings, the Teacup Library, they called it. A place where dreams were shelved like books, and forgotten thoughts rested in corners like sleeping cats. She descended the stairs slowly. With each step, the scent of old paper and steeped honey grew stronger. Inside, the space opened wide, impossibly wide for such a small cup. Shelves curved up and around in every direction, filled with tiny books, each no larger than a matchbox. Floating lanterns bobbed overhead like sleepy fireflies, casting a buttery light over everything. And curled inside an armchair, made of woven tea leaves and silk napkins, was the Dormouse. He was smaller than she remembered. Or perhaps the space was just larger. Either way, he looked perfectly content, half asleep, spectacles sliding down his nose, a book open and resting gently on his chest. When Alice stepped forward, he stirred, not with alarm, but with that soft awareness only those who dwell in dreams possess. "Ah, you've come," he he said, yawning into a napkin. "We were starting to think you might sleep through the story." "I've walked through memories," she said, her voice hushed. "But they felt softer." He nodded, pushing his glasses up with both paws. "That's because they aren't memories, exactly. They're rememberings. Active, alive, like dreams with roots." Alice scanned the room. "Are these all mine?" He smiled. "Some are yours, some are ours. Some belong to the moments you forgot mattered." She stepped closer to the shelf. One tiny book caught her eye, bound in deep blue velvet, titled "The Day You Felt Seen." Another beside it read, "A Laugh You Didn't Know Was Missed." Alice reached for one, but the Dormouse gently placed a paw on her wrist. "Not yet," he whispered. "You're not here to collect. You're here to rest." He pointed to a nearby chair that had pulled itself away from the wall, plump, quiet, and faintly warm. Alice hesitated, then sat. The chair sighed beneath her, like it had been waiting years for this very moment. The Dormouse settled back into his own and picked up a book. He didn't read aloud, not with words. Instead, the room seemed to hum, like the vibration of someone thinking kind thoughts very far away. Alice closed her eyes, and as she sat there in a teacup beside an old friend who said little but knew much, she realized something. This was never about Wonderland needing her. It was about her needing to return to the place inside herself where everything still made sense, where even nonsense had shape, where broken time could still be beautiful. She didn't know how long she sat in the library, only that when she stood, her breath came easier, her heart felt unwound. And the Dormouse, now dozing again, whispered one last thing before sleep took him. Dreams aren't what we visit, they're what we remember how to live in. When Alice left the teacup library, the path was already waiting. It wasn't made of moss or gears now. It was something softer, something like starlight stitched into earth. No signs marked the way, only the rhythmic sound of ticking. Not loud, not urgent, just steady, like a heart at peace. As she walked, the dream deepened. The air turned cool, but not cold. The sky above had no stars, and yet everything shimmered, as if even the darkness had chosen to glow for her return. And then, nestled in the curve of a hill, she saw it, a cottage, her cottage. But it wasn't the one she knew from waking life, not exactly. This one was stitched from memory and comfort. The roof was thatched with pages torn from old journals. The door was a shade of blue she remembered from a scarf worn long ago, and the windows flickered with warm light, like someone was already inside, waiting. She stepped in. The ticking grew louder, but it wasn't clocks. It was everything. The fire in the hearth, the kettle on the stove, the sway of the curtains. All of it moved with time, not ruled by it, but dancing with it. At the far wall stood a workbench, and beside it, turning slowly toward her, was the clockmaker. But it was not someone new. It was her. Not the version that wandered Wonderland as a girl. Not the woman lost in memory, but the version who had become the dream, who understood that time wasn't something to fight, but something to feel. Alice stared at herself. Older, calmer, radiant in stillness. The clockmaker smiled. "You remembered," she said. Alice stepped closer, unsure if she should speak. "You thought you were following Wonderland," the clockmaker continued. "But it was following you. Every piece of it, every soul you met. They were reflections, echoes, invitations back to the part of you that never left." Alice's eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. They didn't need to. She looked around the room. Every clock on the walls ticked in harmony. Not the same, but together. "I don't know how long I've been here," she whispered. The clockmaker nodded. "That's because you never left. You simply forgot how to visit." Alice looked down at her hands. Steady, soft, real. "What happens now?" "You rest," said the clockmaker. "And when you wake, you carry us with you. Not in memory, in presence, in stillness, in the gentle way you move through time." The fire crackled behind her. The tea on the stove began to steam, and every clock in the room let out a single soft chime, as if to mark not a beginning or an end, but the exact now of her being. Alice stepped toward the fire, pulled a shawl over her shoulders, and sat in the chair by the window. She looked out at the night, not to dream, but to remember. And Wonderland, quiet and content, folded itself around her like a closing book. The end. From all of us here at Storytime Boulevard, thank you for joining us tonight. May this tale ease your breath, calm your thoughts, and guide you gently into deep, peaceful sleep. You are not lost. You are not late. You are simply remembering your way home. Sleep well, dear dreamer. You are never too old to wonder. Good night.